So I worked in a forensic laboratory environment for 20 years, and I retired my career early so that I could go into private practice and do what I'm doing now. And so I love what I do. I work with clients in forensic science all across the United States. I've done quite a bit of work overseas as well, which I've really enjoyed, and I continue to take a real great interest in the management of forensic laboratories and the leadership that is provided to forensic science professionals today. Well, my interest in management, forensic science management, came from a very painful experience, because in the very first few years, 2 to 3 years of my career as a forensic science professional, I endured horrific managerial in a horrific managerial environment. I mean, you couldn't believe what I was dealing with, and not only that, what people before me had dealt with. The lack of professionalism, the abusiveness, the manipulation. There was racial discrimination. There was sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, sexual hostility. That laboratory doesn't have those problems today, thankfully. But at the time, this was in the first couple years of my career, and I thought I had entered the seventh circle of hell. I didn't know what I had got myself into, and I thought, if this is what forensic science is like, there's no way I'm going to stay in it. So I was, looking for other jobs. But I'm glad that I stayed with it, and eventually I was hired by the ATF lab in Atlanta, and got to work on the investigation of the Atlanta serial bombings, which included the '96 Olympics, and got to work with a lot more professional people. So that was a real game changer for me, and I'm very thankful that that happened. Well, I think for most people that go into management and forensic science, particularly those that become a laboratory director, getting your membership in the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors for the first time is usually a very important moment in your career, because that's when you get to begin to interact with other leaders in the field and start to learn things about the management of forensic science organizations that you never knew before. That was certainly the case with me. But when I came into ASCLD in 2000, I had about 7 years of forensic science experience and had just become a lab director in a small county laboratory in the Chicago area, which had its own managerial challenges, and certainly the office in which I was in had huge managerial challenges. But by that time, I had just become almost obsessed with my desire to play a role in improving the organizational cultures and the leadership conditions in which forensic science professionals were operating. And so I saw ASCLD as a place to learn and a place to contribute, which it certainly was. ASCLD is a great marketplace of ideas in that regard. So in 2004, I got on the board of directors, and I started to give some presentations about management. And back then, the thing you need to understand, back then, the focus was quality assurance in the 1990s and the early 2000s, which was when CODIS came on board. So the big focus was on quality assurance and quality management. And so there wasn't a lot of people out there that were, in fact, I can't think of anybody, that were talking about leadership in forensic science and the need to improve organizational cultures to the degree that I was, almost to the point of almost being annoying. But I gave my first full day workshop at ASCLD on an HR topic in, I want to say 2007 or something, or 2006, 2007, I'm not sure when, but it was in the early 2000s. And it was on onboarding of new employees, a full day workshop, and the feedback was great. Everybody loved it, and over the next few years, you started to see people at the ASCLD symposium giving presentations in front of the main plenary audience, and they would use words like onboarding and HR, and that was very heartening to me because I felt like I was making a difference, and other people in the community were starting to share their own ideas about management. So leadership and management in forensic science was starting to become a more routine conversation to the degree that it never had been before. But the thing that was hard for me was when I became an accreditation inspector back in the very early 2000s, and I started doing laboratory assessments and realized that there were still major managerial problems in forensic science labs, and there were still a lot of forensic science professionals out there that were working in conditions that were subpar, substandard from a cultural or managerial standpoint. And that was really what drove me to just continue to become more and more focused on trying to develop curricula for teaching leaders, giving leadership workshops. I've been all over the country and overseas doing forensic leadership workshops. And so now what I do is I am an executive coach. And so my interest now, I still have the same interests, even more so on developing professionalism and leadership talent in forensic science. But more recently, my interest is in developing what I like to call executive level talent in forensic science. And when we talk about executive level, what I mean is an executive leader is different from other kinds of supervisors or managers, because executives are leaders of leaders, which requires a completely different set of skills, a different level of self-mastery and self-control and self-restraint, and a really strong understanding of your strategic environment, and being able to fit your own tendencies and strengths and weaknesses into your current strategic environment as it now exists. In other words, to make yourself a better match for the environment which you're in. And then once you can do that, you can certainly influence that environment and try to improve it as you and your team see fit. So becoming formally trained as an executive coach was a real game changer for me, because that was the moment where I really started to understand management and leadership at a completely different level than I ever had before. And it was also very encouraging, because I also began to understand what the possibilities were for forensic science laboratories and for forensic science professionals and for existing forensic science managers if they started to develop or made the effort to develop their executive leadership skills, that the possibilities and the opportunities were really great, and were worthy of that effort. So what I would say to any forensic science professional out there is, number one, be a consummate professional. Nobody should be able to talk about you behind your back and say that you're not a consummate professional. My hope for any forensic science professional is that when people think about them, people in their own labs or the stakeholders that they work with, that when people think about them or talk about them, that they can say that they can describe you as being a consummate professional, that you're a joy to work with, that your knowledge is admired, and that the fact that you work in that laboratory makes the laboratory a better place. That's what every forensic science professional should aspire to. For anybody in a supervisory position, let's say a unit supervisor or maybe the director of a small laboratory, as I was at one time, where your scope, your sphere of influence is a little bit smaller, but you still have leadership responsibilities. Your number one goal is to use your rank, stature, and authority responsibly, and to be a partner to your staff, to the people that you lead, and not a boss. I wouldn't wish that on any leader. Your goal isn't to be a boss. Your goal isn't to tell people what to do. Your goal is to create the conditions in which they can thrive. And there are certain ways that you do that. Some people are good at it, some people are not. But what I can tell you is that your rank in the organization, or the number of years of experience you have, those are not what motivate top performance amongst a team, including forensic science professionals. So if you want to get the best out of your team, my hope for you as a leader is to become a good conversationalist, become a good facilitator, and create the conditions where people can thrive. And then if you are the director of a laboratory system or a very large laboratory and you consider yourself to be at the executive level, my hope for you is that you gain the highest levels of self-mastery and self-understanding that you've ever had in your life, and that you are able to deal with the many very difficult challenges and problems and issues that you face without having any kind of painful emotional reaction to them, that nothing really surprises you, and that behind your back, people describe you as being unflappable and solid and reasoned and able to recruit the efforts of the people on your team so that you bring as much expertise to bear on the things that you're facing on a regular basis. So I see a very good, strong, healthy forensic science community in the coming decades. I want to be a part of that. I intend to be a part of that as an executive coach and as an author and as a teacher and so forth. But we're going to have to continue to make ourselves better, and we're going to continue to have to talk about the ways in which we can improve the cultures and the environments of our laboratories, even if those conversations are difficult to have. So I think it's going to be a good century for forensic science, but we're going to have to work at it to earn it.